People have been killed performing 4x4 recoveries, but there's no need for that to happen if you use a technique that we call the hierarchy of recovery. The team at Sabre Off-Road are one of Australia's leading manufacturers of off-road equipment. Their motto is safer, smarter and stronger recovery equipment. But it's all very well having the good equipment. Do you know how to use it when you're out there on the trails? So in this video, I want to help you understand how to apply the hierarchy of recovery when you find yourself stuck out there on the trails. Now, the first thing to do is to make sure that the vehicle is actually in four-wheel drive. The number of times I've seen people out there on the trails and they don't know how to actually engage four-wheel drive. So make sure that you've read your owner's manual before you get out there on the trails. The second step is to let some air out of your tyres. The reason we want to do this is, firstly, it allows the tyre to soften up and mould to the terrain that we're going to be covering. And the second thing is that it allows the tyre's footprint to be longer. That means more rubber on the surface. That means we've got more traction. As a very rough rule of thumb, I let about 1/3 of the air out of the tyre that I've been running on road. So let's say I've been running 30 PSI on road. I'm going to drop this tyre down to 20 PSI. Very rough rule of thumb, but it gets you started. And the third point is, can you use simple techniques to increase the traction available to the tyres? Can you use a shovel to dig out from in front of or behind the tyres? Can you use a shovel to put some weight or soil or whatever in front of the tyres and fill some holes? Can you use the shovel to dig out from under the vehicle? Can you use rocks or whatever to pack the holes and fill the holes where the vehicle's going to be trying to traverse through? And to use tread boards to give you a bridging agent, to give you a ramp, and give you that extra traction that's going to help you get out of the bogging situation. By performing these three steps, we've reduced the recovery load. And what that means is we've reduced the amount of energy that's going to be required to get the vehicle out of the bogging situation. Point number 4 is a tow recovery. Now, for this recovery, you're going to need another vehicle. If you don't have another vehicle, this isn't going to work for you. A tow recovery is oftentimes confused with a kinetic recovery, which we're going to cover off in a moment. See, a tow recovery is where we're going to connect the two vehicles together like I have here. This vehicle is going to drive away, stop when the rope gets tight, and then from that point we're going to drive together and pull away. What we're doing is we're using the tractive force of this vehicle to supply energy to the bogged vehicle. Now, I know the 200 isn't really bogged in this scenario, but you'll get the idea. The main thing is, don't confuse tow recoveries with kinetic recoveries, because they need to be performed differently and the equipment that you can use can be different. In a tow recovery, you could use chain, you could use wire rope, all sorts of other devices. Now, with a kinetic recovery, you can only use a kinetic recovery device connected to the vehicles in the appropriate way, and make sure that both drivers have the appropriate training. Point number 5 is a winch recovery. Now, a winch recovery is generally considered very safe, assuming that you've got excellent quality gear in good order. It is also a very powerful and effective recovery method, but you do need to have the skills and knowledge on how to do a winch recovery correctly. One of the big advantages of a winch is that it has an inherent fuse. It has two of them actually. The first is it has a designed capacity. It's only so strong. The second is the electrical system in the vehicle only has so much power that it can generate. Both of these mean that the winch will not keep generating winching force until the cows come home. It gets to a point where it stalls, it stops working, and that's excellent. All of this means that when we get to a point in a winch procedure where something starts to load up, we can hear the winch working a bit too hard, or we might see an anchor point starting to move, or something going on. Because the winch recovery is slow, we can get off the winch controller and stop the winching and make corrections to the winch recovery. At the end of the day, it's really important to get the training on how to perform a winch recovery safely, which I'm not covering off in this video, but assuming you get that training, you have excellent quality gear in good order, a winch recovery is going to get you out of pretty much every recovery situation. Number 6. This is by far the most dangerous way you can recover a vehicle. It's called a kinetic recovery. I don't perform these very often other than when I'm doing videos, but in anger it's been a few years since I've performed a kinetic recovery. That's how dangerous I consider them to be. Many people have died from them, and there's a few reasons why. Primarily, these can generate significant amounts of energy, and that's why they're very effective at getting bogged vehicles out of bogging situations. The big problem is it's an uncontrolled energy release, and it's an uncontrolled amount of energy that can be generated. The danger in kinetic recovery is this. If you've got a vehicle that's travelling at 4 kilometres per hour and it generates X amount of energy. Let's say you take the 4 kilometres an hour and you double it up to 8 kilometres an hour. So you're now going 2 times the speed you were before. You're actually now generating 4 times the amount of energy you were at 4 kilometres an hour. Now, if you go to 16 kilometres per hour, you're going to be generating 4 times the amount of energy that you were at 8 kilometres an hour. So as you can see, the amount of force or energy that you generate with your vehicle is significant. And that's why kinetic recovery can be so dangerous. Now, saying all of that, they can be performed safely. One quick tip: the maximum speed the towing vehicle should apply is about 10, maximum 15 kilometres per hour. If the vehicle's not getting out of the bogging situation at that speed, then it's time to reconsider your recovery methods. You don't want to just keep going harder and harder because things will break. When you're connecting up with a kinetic recovery, you want to use a bridle and connect to 2 recovery points on the front of the vehicle. At the back of the vehicle, you need to connect to a suitable recovery point that can really handle these extreme loads. Now, how does a kinetic recovery differ from a tow recovery? Primarily, you know how in the tow recovery we stopped when the rope got tight and then drove off and just used the tractive force. With a kinetic recovery, this vehicle will continue moving through that moment, and that's where we generate significant amounts of energy to unbog this vehicle. So the hierarchy of recovery: make sure you're in 4-wheel drive, air your tyres down, then we're going to pack rocks, use the shovel, we're going to use traction boards, then we're going to do that tow recovery, we're going to look at the winch, and lastly, we're going to consider a kinetic recovery. I'm Mad Matt, stay safe on the trails.